Imagine a city frozen in fear. Over a dozen women, all found brutally murdered, with no clue as to who the killer might be. The people of Boston were terrified, and for years, they lived in the shadow of a faceless predator. This is the story of the Boston Strangler, one of the most notorious and chilling serial killers in American history, a mystery that haunted the city and left the entire country in shock. In the early 1960s, Boston was a bustling and culturally rich city, full of life and energy. But beneath this vibrancy, a growing sense of unease began to spread. The city was facing an era of social change, yet the shocking wave of murders disrupted any sense of safety. Women, in particular, felt vulnerable as the community was shaken by fear. The news of brutal killings began to dominate headlines, and the entire city was gripped by anxiety, wondering who would be next. This was a time when Boston was both thriving and living in the shadow of terror. It all began in 1962 with the murder of Anna Slazers, a 55-year-old woman found strangled in her own home. Over the next 2 years, more women would fall victim to the same fate. Most of them were older, lived alone, and had no signs of forced entry, suggesting they might have trusted their attacker. The killer's method was brutal. Each victim was strangled, often with their own stockings, leaving behind a macabre signature. As the bodies piled up, investigators realized they were dealing with a serial killer, and the pattern of terror sent shockwaves through the city. On June 14, 1962, 55-year-old Anna Slazers was found dead in her apartment in Boston. She had been strangled with the cord of her own bathrobe, what at first appeared to be a tragic, isolated incident would soon be recognized as the beginning of a horrific series of killings. Anna's murder marked the start of what would become known as the Boston Strangler's reign of terror. Her death was brutal, calculated, and left no obvious clues for investigators, setting the tone for the chilling crimes that followed. The Boston Strangler had a calculated method. He gained entry into his victims' homes by posing as a handyman or someone in need of help. Once inside, he would overpower the women, often sexually assaulting them before strangling them to death. What made the crimes even more terrifying was the lack of forced entry. There were no broken windows or doors kicked in. This meant the victims had willingly let the killer inside, adding to the fear that he could be anyone, and that anyone could be his next victim. As more women were found brutally murdered, fear spread like wildfire across Boston. Each victim had been strangled, often with stockings or pieces of their own clothing tied tightly around their necks. Women in the city began living in constant anxiety, locking their doors and double-checking their windows. The fact that the killer was still out there, striking again and again, left the city in a state of terror. No one knew who would be next, and no one felt safe not in their homes, not in the streets. The Boston Strangler had the entire city on edge. The Boston police quickly launched a massive investigation after the first few murders, determined to catch the killer before he could strike again. Detectives combed through the crime scenes, interviewed witnesses, and pieced together every shred of evidence they could find. Despite their best efforts, progress was slow. The killer left behind no fingerprints, no clear motive, and no signs of forced entry, making the case frustratingly difficult to solve. As the body count rose, the public grew more anxious and frustrated, feeling that the police were no closer to catching the Boston Strangler. Meet Albert DeSalvo, a man whose troubled past made him a key figure in the Boston Strangler case. DeSalvo had a history of criminal behavior, including sexual assault, which raised red flags for investigators. He was known for his violent tendencies and had spent time in and out of mental institutions. In 1964, while serving time for unrelated crimes, he began to confess to being the Boston Strangler. His disturbing claims, filled with details about the murders, shocked the police and the public alike. However, DeSalvo's confession was complicated by his unstable mental state, leaving many to wonder if he was truly the killer or simply seeking attention. Before the Boston Strangler case, Albert DeSalvo had already gained notoriety for 2 different series of crimes. He was known as the Measuring Man because he would pose as a modeling agent, tricking women into allowing him into their homes under the pretense of measuring them for potential modeling jobs. Once inside, he would assault them. Later, he took on another identity as the Green Man, where he posed as a maintenance worker. This time, he targeted women living alone, often in apartment buildings. He would gain their trust and then attack them, leaving a trail of fear and confusion in the community. At this point, his crimes had not yet been linked to the Boston Strangler, but they showcased his manipulative tactics and violent behavior, foreshadowing the horrors that were to come. While serving time in prison for unrelated crimes, Albert DeSalvo made a shocking confession to his cellmate. He claimed to be the infamous Boston Strangler, the very figure that had haunted the city for years. This revelation sent shockwaves through the authorities. Until that point, police were investigating multiple suspects, trying to find the person responsible for the brutal murders of numerous women. DeSalvo's admission changed everything. His detailed accounts of the murders aligned with the police reports, and they began to take his confession seriously. However, it raised many questions. Was he telling the truth, or was he seeking attention? The investigation into DeSalvo intensified as detectives tried to piece together the truth behind his chilling claims. Despite Albert DeSalvo's shocking confession to being the Boston Strangler, he was never convicted of the murders. Instead, he was sentenced for unrelated sexual assaults. The main reason for this was the lack of physical evidence linking him to the killings. Authorities found it difficult to prove he was the murderer without more concrete proof, leaving the case unresolved. DeSalvo's confession sparked a wave of skepticism. Many people believed he might have been lying to gain notoriety or attention, as he had a history of manipulating others. Others suggested that there could be more than one person involved in the crimes. The questions surrounding DeSalvo's truthfulness only deepened the mystery of the real Boston Strangler, leaving many to wonder if justice had truly been served. In recent years, advances in DNA testing have reopened the Boston Strangler case. This technology allows investigators to analyze evidence that was not previously usable. In 2013, a breakthrough occurred when DNA evidence linked Albert DeSalvo to the final victim, Mary Sullivan. This connection suggested that he may have indeed been the killer. The results reignited public interest in the case and sparked discussions about the accuracy of previous investigations. With new tools and methods, investigators continue to explore the details surrounding the Boston Strangler, bringing hope for closure to the victims' families and the community. As we discuss the Boston Strangler, it's important to remember the women whose lives were taken. They were not just statistics in a crime spree, they were real people with dreams, families, and stories that deserve to be told. Each victim had her own unique life. Anna Slezers, the first known victim, was a 55-year-old woman who had a warm smile and a kind heart. Mary Sullivan, the last victim, was just 19, full of hope and potential. They had families who loved them and friends who cherished their memories. Their tragic deaths left deep scars in the community. The fear they faced is still felt today. By remembering these women, we honor their lives and acknowledge the impact of their loss. It's a reminder that behind every statistic, there is a person whose story matters. The media played a significant role in shaping the narrative of the Boston Strangler case. From the very beginning, newspapers and television reports sensationalized the events, turning the killer into an almost mythical figure of terror. Headlines screamed about the brutal murders, often using dramatic language that instilled fear in the hearts of the public. Each new victim brought more coverage, and the stories became more chilling. The press painted a picture of a cunning and elusive killer lurking in the shadows, striking fear into the city of Boston. This relentless coverage not only intensified public anxiety but also added to the legend of the Boston Strangler. As rumors spread and theories flourished, the killer became more than just a person. He transformed into a symbol of fear. This media frenzy turned the case into a spectacle, distracting from the real tragedy, the lives lost and the families shattered by these horrific crimes. The Boston Strangler case left a deep and lasting impact on the city. For many residents, the fear that gripped Boston during the murders never fully faded. The brutal killings of multiple women created a sense of vulnerability and mistrust. People began to question their safety, especially women living alone. In the aftermath, the city took significant steps to improve public safety. Neighborhood watch programs were formed, and the police increased their presence in vulnerable areas. Yet, despite these efforts, the psychological scars remained. Many citizens carried a heightened sense of awareness and anxiety in their daily lives. The Strangler's legacy also influenced how crimes were reported and investigated in Boston. Law enforcement learned the importance of community engagement and communication. The fear and trauma experienced by the city shaped a new era of vigilance, where everyone was more cautious about their surroundings. Ultimately, the Boston Strangler case became a part of the city's history. It served as a reminder of the fragility of safety and the need for continued efforts to protect the community. The shadows of those tragic events lingered long after the murders, forever marking Boston's psyche. Over the years, many theories have emerged about the identity of the Boston Strangler. While Albert DeSalvo confessed to being the killer, doubts linger about the truth of his claims. Some believe he might not have acted alone, suggesting that there could have been a group involved in the murders. This theory gained traction because of the nature of the killings, which seemed to have similarities that were too distinct to be the work of a single person. Others point out that DeSalvo's confession may have been a way to gain notoriety or manipulate the media attention surrounding the case. His troubled history and mental health issues raise questions about the reliability of his statements. For many, the possibility of a larger conspiracy adds to the mystery of the Boston Strangler. Psychologists and criminologists have studied the mind of serial killers to understand what drives individuals like the Boston Strangler. Many believe that a combination of factors, including childhood trauma, mental illness, and a desire for power, can lead someone down this dark path. Serial killers often struggle with deep-seated issues, including feelings of inadequacy or rejection. In the case of DeSalvo, experts have noted that his history of violent behavior and sexual assault could indicate a compulsive need to exert control over his victims. This need often manifests in brutal ways, reflecting a profound psychological disturbance. Understanding the mind of a killer can provide insights into not only the motives behind their actions, but also the warning signs that can help prevent future tragedies. Ultimately, the Boston Strangler case remains a haunting enigma, filled with unanswered questions and unsettling theories that continue to captivate the public's imagination. The Boston Strangler has become a permanent fixture in true crime culture, capturing the fascination of people across generations. Books, documentaries, and movies have explored the chilling details of the case, each offering a different perspective on the murders and the man accused of committing them. One of the most notable adaptations is the film The Boston Strangler, which portrays the life of Albert DeSalvo and the terrifying events surrounding the murders. This cinematic exploration brought renewed attention to the case, sparking interest in the minds of serial killers and the nature of evil. Additionally, podcasts and true crime series delve deep into the mysteries of the Boston Strangler, inviting listeners to engage with the story in a personal way. The sensational nature of the case keeps it relevant, as new generations seek to understand the psychology behind such horrific acts. This obsession with the Boston Strangler speaks to a broader interest in crime, morality, and the complexities of human behavior. As we reflect on the Boston Strangler case, we are left with lingering questions. Was Albert DeSalvo truly the only killer, or did he share his crimes with others? The ambiguity surrounding the case raises doubts about whether it has ever been fully solved. What remains clear is that the Boston Strangler is one of the most terrifying chapters in American crime history. The impact of the murders on the victims' families, the city of Boston, and society as a whole continues to resonate. Decades later, this case still evokes a mix of fear and intrigue, reminding us of the dark corners of human nature and the unresolved mysteries that linger in the shadows. The Boston Strangler will forever be a haunting story, echoing through time and serving as a chilling reminder of the capacity for evil. And with that said, thanks for watching True Stories. If this tale of mystery and superstition caught your interest, hit that subscribe button to join us for more fascinating stories from history's strangest corners. Until next time, stay curious.